Good afternoon. I wanted to do a part two to the show I did this morning because, first of all, I forgot one of the most important parts. That's on me. To make sure that you all know how to contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. If someone you love or you yourself are thinking of suicide or thinking that you would be better off dead, please call this hotline. They will help you. They really will. And I want to continue the talk about these drugs and these drug interactions and these antidepressants that so many Americans are being prescribed every minute of every day. And the fact that while supposedly the depression that these drugs are supposed to treat is due to a brain disorder, many of you have never had a brain scan, a CAT scan. None of you have actually seen x-rays of your brain saying, here's serotonin. You don't have enough of it. You need these drugs. You don't get that. That's too expensive. Insurance probably won't even pay for it. And yet you're given these drugs with the assumption that because you go to a doctor and say, I'm sad, I have anxiety, I'm unhappy, my mom just died, my dad just died, my dog just died. You know what? Guess what? You're supposed to be sad when someone you love passes. You're supposed to be upset. You're supposed to have your time of mourning. You don't need drugs to get over that. And yet, there are medical providers and pharmacies that will provide you with drugs basically telling you, you don't have to feel sad. We'll make you feel better. Do you want to feel better? Your mom just died. After my mom died, I didn't want to feel good. I didn't want to laugh. When my dog died, I was supposed to cry. And yet someone prescribed me with this fixer thing, and all of a sudden, I'm sorry, it was Lexapro. And I couldn't cry. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I couldn't actually feel the sadness. So I guess the drug was working, and yet I was still deeply saddened by the sudden death of my beloved dog. But I couldn't cry. And I'm like, wait, what's wrong with crying? What's wrong with being sad? What's wrong with being a little depressed? What's wrong with being big depressed? If someone you loved and cherished is dead, there's nothing wrong with that. And I submit to you, you don't need a pharmaceutical pill to get you through that. Before these farm drugs were ever even thought about, people suffered great losses. Losses of their children, losses of pets, losses of their spouses, losses of their parents, and they got through it. But in 2018, guess what? You don't have to feel anything. Someone dies, we'll give you a pill. You can laugh at the funeral. You won't care. Don't you want to care? Don't you want to feel and experience the grief that is normal when you have a terrible loss? And I'm telling you, these drugs are being prescribed for people who should be sad, who should be depressed. Not just people with this serotonin issue with their brains. And again, how do we know they have a serotonin issue with their brains? Where is the brain scan? Where is the x-ray? Where is the bleeps on the screen that say, this is what serotonin should look like, yours is a little less, you need these drugs? I don't think anybody gets that. Have any of you that are on antidepressants right now, because you have been diagnosed with bipolar or a serotonin deficiency and you're on the Zoloft or the Paxil or the Celesta, have you ever had a brain scan? Have you ever been shown the x-ray of your brain and actually what is wrong with it and that these drugs are going to fix it? Please let me know. I want to know. Because I only thought about it in the middle of doing the earlier show. Why are people getting all these antidepressants never given brain scans to prove they actually have the illness that these drugs are supposed to cure? So please let me know. Here's something else I want you all to think about doing, and it's important. I don't care if you're 18 years old, if you're 20 years old, if you are 50 or 60 years old. Somewhere, write down every prescription medication that you take because it's important. If you are married, write it down. You tell your husband or wife where that list is. If you are a single young person, I know you want to break the apron strings, you want to be independent, but if you are taking prescription medication, write it down. Send your mom or your dad or a brother or a sister, send them a copy. Because if, God forbid, you fall unconscious and an ambulance comes and they take you to the hospital, they need to know before they treat you any script drugs you're on. They need to know vitamins. What vitamins are you taking? Because some vitamins, if you're on a certain kind of vitamin, they may treat you a different way. You must let someone know. HIPAA laws have made everybody think that their medical stuff is theirs and theirs alone. And yes, that's true. The government has no business in our medical records. The insurance companies who want to charge us extra because of what's in our medical records, they have no business in our medical records. And yet, insurance companies can get those records. They know every time you go to the doctor. They know what you were diagnosed with. They know what prescriptions you take. They know more about you, insurance companies. And they keep it all on record for when your next premium comes up. They know more about you than some of the people who actually love and care about what happens to you. Insurance companies don't give a fuck what happens to you. Remember that. The pharmacy you go to get your drugs filled, they don't care what happens to you. And sometimes your medical providers, well, they have their own reasons for doing what they do. And it's not always in your best interest. You have to be your own advocate. If you are prescribed a drug before you even fill it, or if you've already filled it before you put it into your body, Google that drug. This is the best thing that has happened to us, the internet. Google that drug. Look at the side effects. Ask yourself, can I handle these side effects? If you can't, flush those drugs down the damn toilet. Look at the side effects. Look at the drug interactions. Don't assume that a medical provider or a pharmacist is going to tell you about them. Because they're going to look at you and go, well, that's an adult. Doctor prescribed it. I don't have to give them any warnings. Let them read the label. How many of you actually do that? I know I never used to. If a doctor prescribed me something, I just took it. I didn't read the label. We didn't have Google back then. Now, nothing goes into this body till I Google it. I get a prescription before I even fill it. I come home first and I Google it. Now, antibiotics, that's a different thing. I told you earlier. But antibiotics also have very serious consequences for women. If you're on antibiotics and you are also on birth control and you don't want to get pregnant, don't have sex when you're on antibiotics. The antibiotics kill your birth control. But I bet many of you didn't know that. Although I have told you that before on my show. So if you watch my shows, you know that. It's a big deal for me because I didn't know. I saw it on a talk show. And then I Googled it. And lo and behold, there it was. Then I actually asked the doctor. Now here's the thing. The doctor who prescribed the antibiotic didn't tell me, right? It was a dentist. He didn't say if you're on birth control, this antibiotic, well, you could get pregnant. But I called my family doctor who did tell me, oh my gosh, if you're on antibiotics, you have to use other forms of birth control, condoms. You can definitely get pregnant until your next birth control shot, because I was on the shot. So the dentist said nothing to me. He just said, here's antibiotics. Never even asked me if I was on birth control. And yet these doctors should know. Anyone who prescribes birth control should know, or I'm sorry, antibiotics should know that if you give antibiotics to a woman, you need to ask, are you on birth control? Because a lot of women out there are on birth control. We don't want to get pregnant. But they don't ask. And we don't know because, well, we're not doctors. You have to be your own advocate. You have to write down every single prescription, any, even over-the-counter crap. If you're taking it every day, write it down and put it in a safe place, and also give it to someone you trust, someone who loves you, a parent, a trusted friend, a sibling, your spouse. They should know, because it can be a life-saving situation. If you go to the ER and you're unconscious and they don't know what scripts you've been taking or what kind of drugs are in your system, they could treat you in a way that ends your life, or in a way that is detrimental to your care. It is so important. And this is why Stevie's mom is trying to get a law passed in his name here in Pennsylvania. The law is already almost through Congress here in the state of Pennsylvania. And it is a law that says that parents of adult children should be informed about any serious prescription medication their children are taking. And she wants it to be named Stevie's Law. Now that, I don't know how to do. But she's thinking about getting a petition, because the bottom line is Stevie's family did not know the drugs that he was prescribed. They didn't know. They knew he was under a doctor's care and they knew he took prescriptions, but they didn't know what the scripts were. And again, he was an adult, you know? And who wants to tell mom everything that's going on in their lives, right? Nobody does that. Well, I used to with my mom, but I'm a girl. Girls are a little different sometimes. The bottom line is, it is important for parents of single adult children to know if their child is being treated for a mental illness. And I know that for some reason mental illness is somehow still a bad word or something to be ashamed of. And yet in this country, it affects millions of mostly young men and women. And we're still ashamed to talk about it. It's something that, oh, well, we don't talk about that. No, he's just on some vitamins. No, he's just a little awkward. No, just come out and say it. Nobody is ashamed to say they have cancer. No one's ashamed to say they have diabetes. No one is ashamed to say that they're on heart medication or Lipitor for high cholesterol. And yet we still have this stigma about mental illness, even though it affects more people than diabetes, more people than the Lipitor, than the high cholesterol. A lot of people have issues, a lot of people in our country, which is why the pharmaceutical companies are getting so rich on their antidepressant drugs. Instead of people going and talking to a counselor or a psychiatrist and really getting the help they need, instead of just band-aiding it with drugs. But I think the parent of an adult child who is unmarried and the spouse of an adult person who is being treated for mental illness should be front and center and should know what medications have been prescribed, what they've been prescribed for, and they should also be open enough to go to counseling and insist on counseling with their child or their spouse. Just as you would support a spouse or a child who has cancer, we need to do the same for mental illness. And unfortunately, we're not doing enough in this country, as we see. Every time there's something that happens and everybody says, well, we knew we had problems, but we couldn't do anything about it because he or she was an adult. It's time that we understand that even as an adult, you are not necessarily acting like an adult when you are suffering from a mental illness. So, if any of you out there, this is a request, Stevie's mom would like to start a petition to get a law passed into the state of Pennsylvania where parents of adult children who have been diagnosed with any form of mental illness, anxiety, depression, and are being prescribed pharmaceutical drugs are able to access their child's medical records at any time and know what's going on with their adult children. And she wants it to be called Stevie's Law. And while the government is working on passing a law such as this, so far she has not gotten anywhere by actually naming it after her beloved son. So if any of you know how to start a petition up, I think she needs 5,000 signatures. I know I'm going to sign. I know a lot of you will sign as well. But we need to get the petition going. So if anybody can tell me how to do that, I would appreciate it. I don't know how to do it. And again, I'm going to put this number up again. It is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. That number can save your life. It can save your life and the life of a loved one a lot more than some of these script drugs can. And I'm not saying that the script drugs are evil incarnate, and I do believe they help some people when prescribed and taken correctly. But when they're not kept track of, and when people don't take them properly, or people don't know anybody's on these drugs, they can cause serious side effects. They can cause death. And you should not be going through this alone. You should not be on script medication alone. Always tell somebody you trust what medication you're on, what you've been prescribed, why you've been prescribed it. Let someone know so that someone can save your life. Political Paula, out.